Sometimes people need the knowledge before they have the confidence to make a decision about the coaching. Sometimes they need to see the world differently first. They need to see how this is actually done and make brand new connections in their brain to where they do say, oh my Lord, aha, I get it now. Oh, wow. And they need that first, maybe. So investing in the education, I think, is a wonderful first step for someone that's not confident enough to bet fully on themselves yet. Once you have the knowledge, though, now you're really stuck because you really don't have a good excuse after that of not investing in yourself and changing your life. And so you will actually find yourself regretful. When you didn't know the knowledge, you were ignorant.
Hey there, dental economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Scott Leune, the founder and CEO of ScottLeune.com. Dr. Leune has been a transformative figure in the dental industry, having opened, built, and sold numerous dental practices while helping over 20,000 dentists enhance their operations through purchasing, marketing, consulting, and more. He is recognized as one of the top 30 most influential people in dentistry and is known for his dynamic seminars that teach dentists advanced practice management techniques. Welcome to the show, Scott. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. It's nice, beautiful weather here in San Antonio, where I'm talking to you from.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I've been really looking forward to having this conversation. I've heard a lot about you. To start us off, can you talk us through your career and maybe how your motivations have changed along the way?
It's a pretty long story that I've told many times, but Cliff Notes, where I graduated as a dentist, opened a startup practice, 400 new patients a month right off the bat. We're slammed. And 2 months in, I broke my back in 4 places. I was in a wheelchair for the next 11 years on and off. And it kind of forced me to get out of the chair and go into the business side of dentistry. I opened multiple practices, sold them, opened multiple more, sold them, eventually helped open more than 200 across the country. And I built other companies that helped these practices and helped other dentists, marketing, IT, billing and insurance claims, phones, all kinds of different kind of services. And throughout the years, I have also, of course, continued to own other dental offices. So when you kind of step back, part of my career is being an owner of dental offices as a trained dentist, understanding kind of the day-to-day operations. Part of it has been someone that has been entrepreneurial and supporting and growing other practices. And I've spent my career studying the business side of dentistry, the laws of business. And today, I spend my career teaching and coaching dentists how to build very profitable practices, whether that's a big vision of lots of locations or it's a different vision of something simple and small and highly lucrative with great patient care. So that is the Cliff Notes version of a career with lots of twists and turns and ups and downs.
So can you talk a little bit about what your ideal client looks like and who benefits the most from the services that you offer?
Currently, I have 5 different events, and those events kind of categorize dentists and I guess clients, to use your word, very well. So I've got an event about how to design and build startups or do any sort of construction project. And that's for dentists that are either looking to build their first practice or looking to expand an existing practice. I teach them how to save a ton of money and do it in a very beautiful way. The second event I give our practice management mastery course. That's for office managers and dentists with existing practices that are really trying to become more mature and elevated and professionalizing that practice and having it grow in a healthy way. I also give an event on having multiple locations, our multi-practice mastery course. That's for people that are more entrepreneurial. They want to go into the business side using these assets that they might call dental practices. And so that's for people that already have multiple locations or they want multiple locations. I've got two more events. One is our team training boot camp, and that's for the whole team. It's probably my favorite event. 2 days, 16 hours of pretty intense business training for the entire team. And then the final event is my dental CEO mastery. And that is maybe the most important event where, in a very small group, in a highly focused way, I teach dentists how to form a new chapter in their career, acting as a highly responsible and innovative CEO. How do we find the time? How do we impact people? How do we make sure that these things actually change and we end up where we want to end up? So you can see that's a very broad type of people that come to my events. The reality is I've also had an incredibly broad set of experiences in my career, and I've chosen these 5 categories to help people in.
Let me dig in a little bit more there. I'm very interested in this. So these events that you have, they take place throughout the year, I'm assuming every few months.
Yeah, we maybe but between the in-house events I offer as well as kind of external speaking engagements, I'm probably teaching people the equivalent of maybe 15 to 20 times a year. And most of my in-house events are 2 days long, 16 hours, usually here in San Antonio. And people could find out more about that if they wanted to at scottleune.com. However, my name has got a really weird spelling. So let me clarify this a little bit. Scott and then LEUNE.com. But I describe my events at that website.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So if you attend one of your events, and one of the challenges that I've found myself is I've gone to different conferences, different events. I love the learning and the education while I'm there. And I personally am challenged with the reinforcement of what I learn post-event. Do you have additional materials or programs that help people to continue down that path and accelerate them past the 2 days where they spend, where they, are just being filled up with all of this incredible knowledge?
Absolutely. But if it's okay, I'd just like to be very raw, to the point, and honest for a bit. The vast majority of events out there in dentistry are not very valuable for people. They're almost like camouflage sales events that are made out to be like a big educational thing. And you might have influencers propping them up and rah-rahing them. And then you get there and you realize, you know what, I don't know if there's much for me here. It may not feel right, or it may feel like I wasn't given any answers yet. I'm just given kind of an extended story. And I can't stand those kind of events. And the problem, one problem with those types of events is you leave and you don't necessarily have the tools you need to significantly impact your life moving forward. I disagree with that whole strategy. I'm someone that might be labeled as giving too much content, too much information, too many steps and know-how and answers and scripting and forms and things like that. But because of that, some people are driven enough internally that if they're given the tools themselves, they'll take out that hammer and that wrench and they'll start making something with it. And they don't necessarily need a lot of hand-holding or a lot of kind of pushing or support or influence. The vast majority of people are like me. Just because I know how to do something and I know I should, doesn't mean I actually do, because the winds of life can blow me left and right and get me off course. And I can kind of lose this drive I might have the minute I learn something cool. And for those people, and for me, it's like, if we want to get healthy, we need a personal trainer to hold us accountable and to make sure we're doing it right. So we've got a shortcut to that result, and we've got it in the most healthy way possible. And I think that's what you are maybe referring to. What does that look like? Someone that wants ongoing support because they know the biggest successes from the biggest people many times come from those people being held accountable to becoming the version they want to be of themselves. And so absolutely, something that I've recognized and that I do for people is I offer private one-on-one coaching. And I combine that with executive coaching from industry executives and team training and team coaching. And all of that is kind of one program that I offer for people that want additional help. They want accountability and they want shortcuts and they want other people training their team and talking to their team. I wouldn't call that consulting. Consulting almost has this kind of traditional feel, this traditional connotation of following someone's little standardized cookbook and like that's what you've got to become. Coaching is a lot different. That's really more individualized, one on one, custom. And I believe a lot of people in life achieve their highest levels when they are connected to that kind of an environment.
How important do you think it is as a dentist or a business owner to build your community as well? To have those that you can speak to separate and apart from your coach that allow you kind of that outlet to continue to bounce ideas off somebody and understand what their struggles are and be able to commiserate with at times.
Yeah, it's never been easier, never been harder to have the right community. So technology, and just apps and things like that have allowed us the easiest time in history to connect with people all over the world and to have conversations with very little friction. However, with that comes a lot of distractions, a lot of options, a lot of people that should not be the people that we are influenced by. And I think I'm seeing more of the problem right now than the solution. So I see a lot of dentists part of communities, whether that be a Facebook group or some local study club or some mastermind they bought into. But just because we're part of a Facebook group doesn't necessarily mean that what we're seeing and hearing is something that is good for us. I think that what we're really trying to get at is to find that crazy few that may not be very vocal, but they are achieving and accomplishing and living like we want to achieve, accomplish, and live. And they are not distracted away by the world. And those people maybe would be willing to share and influence us. That's a really valuable community. And it's likely got very few people in it. And now, how important is that? I think that's what you asked. If you can find a community like that or create one, it could be very influential because those communities instill a level of trust in us and vice versa, because we're kind of all in it together, helping each other. Also, we learn from their experiences as opposed to being judged by our accomplishments. And that's a really positive kind of environment to be in. And a lot of our ability to stay focused, to just get the next thing done, to deal with the dramas of life can come from being inspired by other people, inspired by what they went through and where they are now. So inspired by their past stories, but also inspired by kind of the things they're able to do. And we weren't sure about it because they're doing it. Now we know it's possible. I know this is real kind of deep philosophical, stuff, but there's definitely a layer of success in dentistry that comes from this mental focus, this kind of influential relationships that we can have with companies and with communities, with our friends, with content that we devour. And we got to be very careful what we're going to mimic, what content we're going to put in our bodies and brains, and what people we're going to be influenced by.
Very well said. So you seem like a straight shooter. And, we're talking about communities and pitfalls and dental conferences and value or lack thereof that people receive and through participating in these different mediums. If you look at the communities that are out there, there's some massive Facebook groups. There's tons of Facebook groups. There's other boards and other paths where people could go and find advice or hear people communicating about different topics or read reviews on this thing or that or the other. Do you ever think that there's value in that path? Or is the direction always to find a smaller, more intimate group of individuals that you can truly trust because you actually know that they have credibility in what they're saying? Do you think it's just too easy to go astray if you go with kind of this mass market approach?
If you were to ask someone highly successful, if you were unsure of something or you wanted a question answered, would you go to a Facebook group with 20,000 people and ask or just read what they say? I think most highly successful people would say absolutely not. The people that are doing that are people that aren't successful and they're unwilling to invest in themselves, whether that's a time investment or financial investment. They're maybe I don't mean this in a really negative way, but they might be kind of in a more ignorant phase of their own self-awareness and leadership and business kind of abilities. And so they may assume that like just getting free advice from dentistry as a whole is something that's valuable. And I believe that the more successful you get and the more you know, the more you recognize that that can actually be a costly waste of time. That the fastest way to achieve what we want to achieve is many times going to the most knowledgeable group or person you can and investing what might be a relatively small amount of time and money to get that answer. And that's only step one. All the other steps after that are our ability to commit to actually doing, to have this uncomfortable confidence of moving forward with something we've never done before, knowing that we don't have fear of something going wrong, but that we've got the grit and the focus to go around these walls we run into and achieve what this other person is teaching us how to achieve. That's a whole nother way of living and a whole nother way of decision making. And those types of people that are that focused on building success, again, are not going to the masses. They're not going to Dr. Facebook and saying, hey, Dr. Facebook, national average, a bunch of people hidden behind their keyboards, tell me what to do. No, they're going to the very most knowledgeable people they can, and they're getting the answer immediately.
Do you think people have a perception early on in their careers that it's too expensive to seek out coaching or guidance in that way? And I'm asking it almost from personal experience. You know, the further along I get in my career, the more I understand the value of coaching, the more I understand the value of mentorship, the more I understand that what you invest in yourself pays out in spades. And earlier on in my career, I thought, I just can't afford this, even though that was probably at the time when I needed it the most. Is that something that you see? And kind of what would be your advice and how do you help people kind of overcome that?
People, they're really, really good at tricking themselves into doing the wrong thing, whether it's fears or assumptions or just a lack of information. They're really good at justifying their current position as being right. And so, yeah, this whole notion, I can't afford to learn how to do something. I can't afford to have coaching. I think that the people that know how to do things would say you can't afford not to. So for example, one of the first benchmarks I have when I personally coach someone is that they achieve $1 million take home pay, not a million collections, but $1 million take home pay. Okay, you're a new grad, you're $500,000 in debt, and you're wanting to build safety and security for your family. What's the fastest way to do that? To achieve high income. And high income isn't achieved by working for a DSO for 8 years while you get your speed up and try to pay down a little bit of debt. High income is by mastering components of the business side of dentistry while owning the business. And can that person afford to not do this sooner? I don't think they could. See, the highest cost that I see is the cost of not doing. That's the highest cost. I can't tell you how many times someone has come to one of my events, for example, and said, I should have done this 10 years ago. I cannot believe I didn't do this 10 years ago. Now, coaching is a pretty expensive thing, I guess, if you look at the dollar amount compared to continuing education courses. Courses themselves, you're probably looking at hundreds or thousands of dollars. Coaching, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars. But what courses give you is the knowledge. And sometimes people need the knowledge before they have the confidence to make a decision about the coaching. Sometimes they need to see the world differently first. They need to see how this is actually done and make brand new connections in their brain to where they do say, oh my Lord, aha, I get it now. Oh, wow. And they need that first, maybe. So investing in the education, I think, is a wonderful first step for someone that's not confident enough to bet fully on themselves yet. Once you have the knowledge, though, now you're really stuck because you really don't have a good excuse after that of not investing in yourself and changing your life. And so you will actually find yourself regretful. When you didn't know the knowledge, you were ignorant. And so you could be ignorantly blissful, thinking, okay, everything's going okay. But once you know how to look at this differently, at that point, you have to be self-aware. You have to be confident. You have to build an environment around yourself that forces you to become the version you wish you were. And a lot of times that is connecting with some sort of group, some sort of coaching.
So, Dr. Leune, in your practice management mastery seminar, you discuss strategies that have led, dentists that you've worked with to achieve, nearly $1 million in annual take-home pay off of $2 million in revenue. Can you break down some of the core components of your profit maximization framework and how it differs from some traditional dental practice models?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not growing big to take home $1 million. Because growing big many times means growing your expenses big. I mean, let's think very simply for just a second. Where does profit come from? It comes from collecting more while keeping your expenses less. And so how can we do that? What does that look like? There's a handful of models that result in this kind of $1 million or more benchmark. The first model that I've got the most experience with is a practice that may only have 5 ops. 3 of those ops would be for hygiene, and 2 hygienists would be covering those 3 ops with the utilization of an assistant. And they might produce something like $2,800 a day in production, adjusted production. Very modest numbers for 3 columns of hygiene. All right, well, that if we're going to get to $1 million take-home pay, we're going to need to be about $2 million in collections if we've got a small 5-op practice. And you can do the math, but if we got $2,800 a day in hygiene, we're going to need something like $5,000 to $5,500 a day on the doctor's side. Well, how do we do that? How do we do $5,500 a day on the doctor's side? The more procedures we know that are larger, the easier it is. If we got on our menu that we do clear aligners and comprehensive ortho and wisdom teeth and implants and sleep apnea, then we get to that number on a relatively small amount of patients. If we don't have anything like that on the menu, we'll get to that $5,000 or $5,500 a day number. But general dentistry, it'll be, 3 crowns and 3 fillings, and, we're probably there, something like that. And so it's important to know that if our goal is to have a high take-home number, it doesn't take high production. What it takes is modest, reasonable production numbers in a facility that maintains a lower cost base. So what does that mean then? Lower cost base. That means less employees. That means you don't have an associate dentist. It means that we're responsible with supply costs and lab costs and marketing costs. It means that our overhead becomes less than 50%. And how can we generate $2 million in collections on such a small office? I already said it, it's reasonable numbers, but strategically, if we can diagnose the dentistry people want and need, and we can have high levels of case acceptance, then we're doing more work without hiring another receptionist. We're doing more work without hiring another hygienist. And we suddenly get to this tipping point where our overhead looks relatively low compared to all the work we're doing. And that case acceptance comes from what's done in the chair. I call that clinical case acceptance. It also comes from what's done when we talk about money. I call that financial case acceptance. And of course, if we're not diagnosing a lot, there's not a lot to accept to begin with. If we don't have a relatively healthy patient flow, there's not a lot of diagnosis going on. And so you can now see what I'm describing is kind of a bunch of knobs that we can turn one way or the other. And they all end up generating the ability to produce while we try to keep the expenses at a very healthy level. And that's assuming what I'm describing right now is I'm assuming a solo owner dentist, 5 ops, 7 staff, maybe open 4 or 5 days a week, wanting to take home $1 million off of $2 million revenue. That same dentist can take home $1 million working part-time by changing the model. And that same dentist can take home $1 million working no clinical time by changing the model again. But the laws of business don't change. If we can grow revenue with healthy operations while keeping our costs down, there's more profit potential. One last thing here. What I see people doing is they're doing the wrong thing today and they want to be more successful. So what do? They speed up the wrong thing. They white knuckle it. They just cram more in. They expand more. They have more costs, more staffing problems, more inconsistencies, no accountability, retention issues. And they just try to go faster and bigger and bigger. And if they can survive that roller coaster, they might end up making more money, but at what cost? And the risk of that roller coaster, that's a high risk roller coaster. You're going upside down without a seatbelt on in that roller coaster. What's a low risk roller coaster is keeping costs at modest levels and focusing on what drives up our collections. That to me is a very smart way of doing it that not enough people talk about.
Yeah. So you just spoke about, three different potential models and the rules of business. And you talked about full-time chair side, you talked about part-time, and you talked about no time, somebody that no longer does any clinical work themselves. And when you're working with clients who are contemplating these different models, and I'm going to make an assumption here, and you tell me if I'm completely wrong, but part of the model is going to be growth with additional practices or larger practices. Initially mentioned, we're not talking always about just getting bigger. You can be incredibly successful with this modest size practices you discussed, but say somebody does have this desire to grow beyond their initial practice or to make their initial practice larger. What are some of the things they should be thinking about in that context? And how do you help them think through whether they have the correct motivations, whether they're thinking about it the right way, or whether they're just completely misguided in the approach that they're looking to take?
I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but I do think it's very common that people that have the desire to have a bigger practice or multiple locations, the desire isn't actually that. The desire is they have a desire to solve some pain point, or they think that there's some pot of gold at the end of that rainbow of multiple locations. So that's an assumption they have. If we were to really get down to it, what do they actually want? What I see a lot is people actually want high income. They actually want a lot of flexibility in their time. They want to feel like they can take time off. They can go on vacation. The practice can operate without them. And many times they want both. And their assumption is to get there, they need multiple practices, or to get there, they need a bigger office. To get there, they need associates. And that's actually a wrong assumption. But having said that though, yes, there is a model that says associates with a large location could be great. And there's a model that says lots of locations can be great. Of course. But we got to make sure, step one, we understand why, truly the fact, the rational reasons why we think we want a big practice or multiple locations. Now, if I want to be a part-time clinician, but never compromise my $1 million take-home pay benchmark, then I'm likely going to have a couple associates in one large location. And I, the part-time clinician, am likely going to only do kind of specialty procedures or bigger cases. And think about this for just a second. If I have associate dentists, and without me, my practice makes a reasonable profit margin. Now add me. I'm going to do specialty procedures, but I'm not going to add ops. I'm not going to add staff. I am going to trickle into the empty gaps of capacity in that business. The gaps where the overhead's already been paid, the rent's already been paid, the office manager was already paid, the receptionist, the utilities. The business already paid those expenses and shows profit. When you add me using just the gaps, the net overhead of my virtual practice, of me, that overhead might only be 10% material cost. So my take-home pay on my own two hands might be 90% if I structure this correctly. So that's an example where maybe I only work 2 days a week, but I'm doing implants and ortho, utilizing the empty chair space we have. And I'm taking home 90% of my number, and I might be taking home 15 to 20% of the rest of the numbers as being the owner. And that can result in me not having to cover hygiene, me being able to take time off, take vacations, and me still taking home $1 million take home pay. And what I described, by the way, I actually accidentally did as a second-year dentist from a wheelchair doing ortho 1 day a week. I took home $1.3 million my second year out of school, not realizing the math, not realizing kind of the laws of business that apply to this situation. I kind of lucked into it as I was trying to figure out what to do with my back injury.
So you're talking a lot about controlling costs and about profitability. Are there examples that you can think of where increasing costs increases your profitability? Are there certain technologies that you can acquire or additional equipment that you should purchase for your office that will ultimately benefit you, though they are also increasing your cost structure?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's think about this theoretically first. If I invest in something new and it takes away more costs, then the net effect is I'm lowering my costs, right? So for example, if I invest in some sort of automated technology for verifying insurance and no longer need to pay for insurance outsourcing services, even though the technology costs me money, my net is that I've lowered my bills, lowered my costs, right? So that's one way that an investment in something can obviously make me more profit. Then you've got this whole notion that says, well, if I invest money in something new, like let's say an intraoral scanner, like a digital scanner, maybe it will generate more production or collections I will outrun my cost. If the scanner's costing me, I'm just going to make something up, whatever, $2,000 a month, but I can land more than that of dentistry in open chair time, then the net effect I'd have more profit. Those are more risky decisions, but I don't want to make it sound risky, but there's less risk in cutting a cost than in permanently increasing a cost with the hopes that you grow enough to justify it. But a lot of technologies are definitely worth investing in for that second reason. If you scan people and you do a smile simulation photo on every new patient, if you are able to communicate that properly, you are definitely going to do more cosmetic dentistry for the rest of your career. And I can't imagine saying no to a scanner because I'm worried about the cost. That's just an example. But look, there's always an if at the end of this sentence. So it makes sense to buy a scanner if you then do these things after that. It makes sense to bring something in-house with technology if you go and reduce the expense that you're spending. Like there's always the if that makes that decision a profitable one. Too many people forget the if. Too many people just kind of invest in something and they don't actually utilize it in a way where it can be monetized correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Let me ask you this. What is something that sounds simple that could have a dramatically positive impact on a practice, but it's just not easy to do?
Oh, answer the phone better. Sounds simple. Don't miss as many calls. And when you do answer them, get patients to schedule more often. National average data shows that out of 100 new patient calls, 68 get answered. So let that sink in for a second. A third get missed. Now, of the ones we answer, these are new patients. You'd think nearly all of them would schedule. But of the 68 that are answered, only 29 end up with an appointment. So let that sink in for a bit. We could have had 100 new patients, but we ended up with 29 appointments. So what's the solution? Answer more calls and say the right thing. Sounds simple, but no, it's not simple. Because what you're asking people to do is by saying something different, you're asking them to completely change the habits that have been like burned and grooved into their brains with neural connections that are now almost muscle memory just coming out of their mouth without them even thinking of it. You're asking them to change that. That takes micromanaged implementation with high levels of auditing and training. That is not simple. And you're also asking them to answer more calls, but how? You got 2 front office people and calls are coming in waves of 5 or 6. Just telling them answer more calls, it's not that simple. We've got to route those calls differently. We've got to utilize third-party services to potentially catch what we miss. All of that has an onboarding phase, an implementation phase, an ongoing relationship we got to manage. It's not easy. But I tell you what, when you're able to just go through those dozen steps you got to go through and you accomplish a better result, your whole life has changed. The difference between 29 patients and 59 patients is your entire life is what's different. And so it's a really important thing to tackle, but it's also a prime example where just learning the information isn't enough. You've got to really have a complete strategy that you are held accountable and you hold your team accountable to move that really big, heavy needle of how many patients do we get from the phone calls.
When I had first heard that stat, it blew me away. Somebody had asked me the question about, how many phone calls do you think are answered? And I was dramatically wrong with my answer. I way over-indexed, assuming that it was significantly more than it is.
We were the first ones to bring this to dentistry. Years ago, I owned the largest outsourcing call center for dentists in North America. And that was before internet speeds were even fast enough for us to do a good job. And we were getting all of this data coming in, we trained IBM Watson to listen to the calls and transcribe them and analyze them. It was AI before we knew what AI was. And we started seeing this data come in and recognize, oh my Lord, this is a massive gap in dentistry. And unfortunately, the technology wasn't there yet. I didn't have the focus, and I could not take that kind of virtual scheduling center at that time and make it really powerful like, I wanted to. But it was my first attempt to try to solve this big problem so that dentists didn't have to solve it. They could just have a third party come and fix this overnight. Of course, since then, a lot of technology's changed. Obviously, internet speeds are fast enough now, and there's new strategies to solve these issues. But those stats came from us originally, and they were shocking.
What do you think the prospects are for AI solving this problem in the future?
It's highly probable that AI is going to take out a big chunk of the problem. Actually, I've already been part of a company that's developed AI to actually answer the calls and talk back to the patients in natural conversation frameworks and to hand off that information to a practice to go ahead and finalize the appointment. And, once that AI can then go actually interact into the software according to machine learning and the software's rules, the AI could actually schedule the appointment. And so we're not far away from AI conversation connecting to online scheduling so that this appointment can be had without a human. The problem, though, is that will we get the same result? Will we get conversion? Will a patient act the same if it's speaking to AI? Are there human components that we're not going to figure out for a long time? We're not going to solve around. So that's why I don't think it'll solve the problem completely, but it's going to be another tool that we will use to try to help. We might use it as a backup tool. If we miss that call and a virtual person misses that call, then maybe AI tries to save the call before it's dropped into voicemail, as an example.
It's really interesting. It's come a long way in a very short period of time. I think one of the big knocks on conversational AI initially was the speed. There was still too much latency and delay in a lot of the conversation when you would speak and then wait for the AI to respond. But even just as recently as I think last week, OpenAI came out with their GPT-4o, and they were doing conversational language translations. It was really incredible. And so I tend to agree with you. I think it's going to be available as an additional tool that people can add that will help support the front office staff in their efforts and likely pick up a lot of that overflow that is missed.
You know what helps with the customer's expectations? It's telling a customer right off the bat, I'm AI. Think about this. If you're in Miami and you want to get a reservation at a restaurant like Sexy Fish, you literally have to call 30 days at 8 a.m. before the day you want a reservation, and you will call and call and call like you're trying to buy some Taylor Swift tickets, trying to get a reservation. You'd much rather have AI from the restaurant answer the call and lead you through to book your reservation instead of all the friction involved with doing it the old way. As a customer, there's going to be lots of moments where I will appreciate AI, but we're in the phase right now where don't try to trick me, right? So let me know what this is, and I will appreciate it if it's appropriately being given to me in the context of what I'm trying to accomplish.
I really appreciate the time. We'll wrap up here in just a minute. Before we do, I'd be really curious to hear from your perspective, as you're looking forward to the back half of this year, what are you most excited about?
Well, on a personal level, I'm very excited because I'm rolling out my website, scottleune.com, a brand new brand and brand new courses and expanded kind of coaching services I'm providing to people. And the results I've had in my career in helping people has really been kind of the thing I look back at and say, that's what's made me the most fulfilled and happy. The money I've made, of course, is wonderful, but that loses its luster. So for me, I'm in this phase of doing something that matters for me. And I don't know if there's a lot of listeners that can relate to that, but when we find ourselves in a position of doing something that matters, it really just gives us a lot of new energy and happiness. And so I'm excited about that. I'm also on my personal side, excited that I've got 5 kids and they're starting to enter in phases where they're performing and they're traveling and we're going on vacations together to fun places. And so I'm excited about that. Now in dentistry, it's kind of the golden age right now of building startup practices. I've never seen it so good. That's a huge, exciting component. Also, we're in this kind of window of opportunity where patient needs are going way up and we don't have the ability to push out enough dentists and hygienists to do that. So that means we need a lot of innovation. And so we're going to be going through a lot of not just technology innovation, but pure like how to manage a practice innovation, how to retain employees, how to structure schedules, even down to the nitty gritty. There's a lot of innovation that's happening because of the stresses we're feeling with inflationary costs going up and staff recruitment is being difficult. So it's just a lot of moving parts that I guess some people look at that as instability and scary. I look at that as exciting innovation and other lots of opportunities to do wonderful things. So that's my long-winded answer to your question. What am I excited about?
That's fantastic. Dr. Leune, thank you so much for joining. For those that want to find you, what's the best way?
So 2 ways. You can go on Instagram and follow me or connect with me. That's my personal Instagram. You're going to see photos of my family on there. And when you send a message, it's me answering. And I'm relatively new to Instagram, a little over a year or so, but it's Dr. like Dr. Scott Leune. Or of course, to learn about what I do professionally, my new website that's being rolled out right now is ScottLeune.com, ScottLeune.com. Those are the 2 best ways to reach out to me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, thanks.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.